And bam, just like that, it just cuts off. Eventually, we'll fix that. Sal Amato here on the Back in the Day show, brought to you by another one of my operations. Yes, it's Digital Saviors Chicago. And don't forget, if you have old VHS tapes, videotapes, audio, vinyl, cassettes, pictures, if you got married 2, 3 times, you're bound to have one of those weddings that you still want to see every now and then, right? We can transfer them all to digital so they last a lifetime, and there's a variety of other things we can do with them. So give us a call anytime, 815-556-2685, or you can visit us anytime online. It is digitalsaviorschicago.com. Oh, are we fluid or what? Look at that. All right. So as you know, every Monday night, 8 o'clock here, what we do is we go back in time and we talk old school. In the first couple episodes, I decided that it was probably better for me, rather than sit here and play with myself and talk to myself all day, I wanted to bring some people on, guests who either I've known, been acquainted with, worked with, respected, or had something to do with a lot of the things that you're all into that you watch either in our WBMX group, WBMX pages, back in the day, the WCKG radio station page, our Q101 page, wherever it is, we talk old school on Monday nights. And I couldn't think of a better guy. And it was, we're very busy, and it was really great for us to be able to schedule him and get him on here. This week, we've got an industry executive who worked Warner Brothers, EMI. He's been around, it says 35 years in his Discogs Trust. He's been longer than that. And he was a co-founder of Emergency Records. And if you were a fan of, you talk about classic stuff, Shannon, Let the Music Play, Give Me Tonight, Do You Want to Get Away? Then she did the cover of Virgin. And then you had Firefly Love's Gonna Be on Your Side, Kano, It's a War, and I'm Ready. Nolan Thomas, which was a massive popular video in the WBMX group this week when we had featured the Yo Little Brother video where they had Prince, little kids playing Prince, Cyndi Lauper. We'll talk about that and more. He was also an adjunct professor at New York University. Tonight's guest, very good friend. Glad to have him along here. Curtis, how are you?
I'm fine, Sal. Thank you for that wonderful intro. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
you just brought back so many memories myself, some of those records.
Oh, the Nolan Thomas video, and back then, well, it was Telegenics and Rock America were like the two primary pools that you could get the music videos on in the clubs. And tell me about how that whole Nolan Thomas video came along real quick.
We had a group of people come in, and at that time, as you can, if you got a chance to see the video, there were Prince was hot, so Pat Benatar, it was all a big scene going on. And so, I mean, there wasn't really much about, Nolan Thomas, we put it together, and the record really took off. So we needed a video as quickly as possible. So, we went out.
So who came up with the concept? I mean, somebody had to come up with the concept.
Yeah, it was a combination of the company that we hired to do the production. They submitted a storyboard, and then it was up to my partner Sergio Cosa and I, along with Mark Liggett, who was involved in the production, and Chris Barbosa and all those guys. And it was just something new, something fresh. And don't forget, at that time we were spurred by the imaging that was already on MTV at the time. So right. You had if that was your end goal, which was to get something to cross over and to get on MTV, it had to look flashy without spending a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the result.
So where'd you do where was the video filmed? Was it done in New York?
Yeah, it was done in New York. It was done in a studio, put together, and it was, it was one of those things. So I got to tell you, I thought it was kind of campy, when going down to the studio session and watching this being filmed. You could see from the sweater and everything. But again, when you factor all this stuff in and all these artists, and then you remember, what videos look like, especially, I think. If I recall, one of the things we were really up against was how David Byrne looked as well in his videos. Mm-hmm. So, when you start looking at the different videos at the time, you had to do something that was going to pop, so to speak, out of the screen. Mm-hmm. And so this concept worked very nicely. And I remember walking out and going, I'm not so sure about this, but it was amazing how people just remembered this video over the years. It's still a classic to this day.
Oh, and and it locks you in, right? I
Yes.
mean, when you see the way the kids are dressed, Purple Rain, 84, Cyndi
Right.
Lauper, Girls Want
Cyndi
to
Lauper.
83. You see Bruce Springsteen with Dancing in the Dark. You see exactly, when you see that's 84. It's 83, 84 right there.
And the amazing thing is, Nolan Thomas doesn't look like he's much older, but the idea of the brother, the little brother, who's spurred on by this whole concept of MTV and all these artists that he's watching, and this radical, like, I'm going to join these guys and stuff. And it was just came. Look at that. Look at the outfits on these guys.
I know, it's great. Now, tell me about Nolan. Tell everybody about Nolan Thomas, because one record, but he had to do something else in life other than Yo Little Brother.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we ended up. I remember doing a Nolan Thomas album, that came out of this. But again, this is just one of those things. A lot of it really emanates from the fact that we were riding high at the time. We were just coming off of a couple of Shannon records. So we were, and we had also the ear of Atlantic Records at the time, because we had just, structured a deal with them, with Shannon, and which took Let the Music Play to pop radio. So, as a dance label, we were looking to try and stay up in that league, so to speak. And it's very difficult to do, as you can imagine. So, the production team of Liggett Barbosa and the people that we worked with, try to find different things to come up with. I think we went from Shannon to Xena
on the upside.
And then I think there was Yo Little Brother. So we, at that point as a label, we were sort of still searching to find our place. Were we going to stay a dance label, or were we going to be a pop label? And so, we had to sort of balance the both in both worlds.
If you're just joining us, Curtis Urbina is sitting with us, record industry executive, former and a co-founder of Emergency Records. And before we go back, let's bring it to today real quick. Curtis, you're doing this Quark Records project. Tell us about Quark Records, and then we're going to go to that mix call, because that's some great stuff. We're going to go to that too. So tell us about that.
Yeah, Quark Records, is a label I started, I'm going to say, probably back in 86, 87, around the time of house music. Was sort of finding its way. By when I say finding its way, that was into the New York culture and stuff like that. By that time, it was already in Chicago, as you well know, and your listeners know. But I started that at about 87. I found our first record. Actually, a DJ producer and someone who worked with us, Freddie Bastone, found Quark's first record. Freddie was a DJ over at Danceteria, as well as many other clubs in New York. And so he found a record called What You Gonna Do by Blaze. And, I was still with Emergency Records, still working with Emergency Records with my partner, Sergio. And I took the Blaze record to Sergio and said, hey, man, I think there's something with this record. Maybe we should do something with it. And, Sergio just didn't get the house concept, didn't get the house music concept, and so forth. It was just too sparse for him. Remember, we were coming from Shannon and Xena and that whole Italian disco.
And that massive production to pare down production.
That's right, to pare down, which was what house music was about and stuff like that. And but I just heard something in this record, and so I said, you know what? I had this little imprint. I had the name Quark already, so I said I'm going to make an imprint. And so I released it on Quark, and I mean, I put the record out on Friday. On Monday, it was on a radio station in New York, WBLS at the time, which was a major influencer. Frankie Crocker had added the record, and the record just blew up. And that was the beginning of Quark. All of a sudden, I now had a new label. So
over a weekend.
Yeah, over a weekend, literally. Man, I remember, Sal, it's the funniest time, because at that time, being an independent, I remember just throwing, I would press up 500 records, and I would throw a couple of hundred in a shopping cart and wheel it down to little record stores, say, hey man, can I put 25 in your store and stuff? And we went from just trying to get over that weekend, trying to get guys to take 25 just to stock it, to all of a sudden Vinyl Mania, Downtown Records, all these major, stores that people want to be in, calling me up and saying, "Hey, we need 300 of this record. We need 600." I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and that's when it's like, oh, okay, this is gonna be this one. I'm gonna get paid for as long as the distributor doesn't go out of business. I'm getting paid for it.
That's right. That was probably, I was even more fearful of it because it was my first record. I didn't even have a history of records like with Quark Records as I had with Emergency. But to fast forward now, I mean, we're 1987 all the way to 2021. I'm still releasing music on the Quark. I think we release somewhat of probably 12 singles a year and a couple of albums, and we just really get it out there, and it's a labor of love. And business has changed dramatically, as everyone knows, so now it's basically about streaming and so forth. But I spend a lot of time really working on getting this music in films and in commercials, releasing it so that it's out there, and people can search for it on Spotify. And I just enjoy it. And the beautiful thing about it is, at the end of the day, it's my label. I own it all by myself, and I have no partners or anything except the people I work with. And people say, "Well, how do you decide what to put out?" And it's just what I love. It's just something
at this point, right? At this point,
I'm playing now, and really, the structure of how we do deals has changed dramatically, but the passion behind putting out good music is what drives the label to this day.
Yeah, and you have a bigger ability, or you have an ability to control it more now than you did before. Like when we had a deal with let's see, was it SOS had to deal with BMG? There were things you had to worry about, because once you went through the money, you went through the money.
Right.
Yeah, sure, you got a distribution deal, but after it's gone, it's gone.
It's gone. Right. It's very tough to go back and get more.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
And now you're your own boss. You don't have. I mean, you know what you can put out. You know what you might get out of it. And if you get anything else after that, it's gravy. And you don't have to sweat. Yeah. So we're looking at the Mixcloud page now too for Radio Quark. Tell us about some of the mixes here, man, because you got some great old school DJs on here.
Yeah.
And you got a great one from Freddie Rastone here too, huh? Look at
that.
I
mean, if some of the, this is again, this page here on Mixcloud, Radio Quark, came about from the fact that many DJs were sitting around as the pandemic started back in February, March, and clubs shut down and nobody knew what they were going to do. So all these DJs were home, and I said, "Look, why don't you send me a mix, like do it about an hour, and I'll start putting them. I'll create this page and I'll put them out, and then I'll blast it out to people and put it on Facebook, put it on all my social media, and see if we get people to, if not for anything other than, just letting people know you're still out here and what you're doing and what your sound is." And, we started with a couple of DJs, and it just has grown to where it now I get DJs from around the world saying, "How can I get on Radio Quark?" So every week I'm going through a batch of mixes that people send me. You see there's a lot of people there like Cafe Solimar from Europe. We put a lot of their stuff out. Tony Smith, who has a weekly show up on Sirius XM Studio 54 channel. So he'll play his show and then he'll send it over to Radio Quark and we'll release on there. Tony Humphreys is on there, who you just passed. You got Corrado Rizza, who is a DJ down in Florida now, but he was one of the big DJs in Italy during the Italian disco days. So that for me is so much fun to put together, and just to watch people's reaction when I blast it out to them. Like they get genuinely excited and look forward to listening to it. Upcoming mixes we're going to have from Louis Vega and stuff like that. And the real secret here is it's perfect using Louis Vega as an example, is when he said, "Well, what kind of show should I give you?" I said, "Think of it this way: whatever you do already for your fans and your show and your social media portals, don't give me that. Give me totally the opposite. I want something that you normally would not do, that would feel, that you've always wanted to do. that's what Radio Quark is about, is like really so. But it also allows like people like Freddie Bastone to revisit, take us back to Danceteria, take us back, do a mix for us of what it was like on the Danceteria floor in the early 80s. And it's great.
Speaking of that, what I liked about it too is that it's all over the place. I mean, I saw stuff from T Connection on there, On Fire, At Midnight, these great songs that came in earlier. We were talking about it's not only just the R&B stuff that's on there, but it's the disco. I mean, and look, I'm talking hardcore disco stuff, like we were the Ultimate, THP Orchestra, Bumblebee Orchestra. I mean, just the really thematic stuff that you had to be a real disco person.
I mean, the fact that you could even mention the Bumblebee Orchestra, Greg Carmichael, and all those guys. I mean, these are people that, I mean, they were fantastic, and they produced some great songs that, you're right, that go really under the radar. Most people think disco, and they think the top 40 songs, the Funky Towns, and
what we call the wedding disco.
Yeah, and you know what? And those are great songs too. I get it, but I mean, there were so many other songs that deserve to be played, and that's what Radio Quark does. It's like, play me those songs.
It's a lot of guys who know this stuff. You got to know this stuff. You've had to live it. You can't just fake it. I started in '78, but I got punished a lot starting in '71. So it was my transistor radio, my record player. When my mother was really serious, she took them both away from me.
Sure. You knew you were in trouble then.
Yeah, but you had to grow up. You had to have the culture to understand it, to know it, where it was coming from. And I was just a weird kid, man, because I knew the rock and roll already. It was old hat to me. It was all the other stuff that I couldn't readily find. Like the THP Orchestra and, Harvey Mason and all these things. You couldn't find them on the radio. That was the stuff that interested me. And that's when I started to get into the DJing, and I started in like '78.
Yeah, those are good things, because I might be a little older, but I started with music back in, I guess, 70, 71, 72, so... But the same thing, you just brought that memory up of having my little transistor radio and putting it under my pillow, with all the chaos. I mean, I remember I grew up in the Bronx. I grew up in public housing in the Bronx. I was we were on welfare at the time, and we didn't have much, but I had my little transistor radio, and we lived in a what they call the projects in the Bronx, and I'm sure they have them all over, and public housing, and it was a 3-bedroom apartment, and it must have been like between, I'm one of 6 children, so you figure with grandparents and everyone there, one of 13 people. The only way I could escape from the noise was to put my radio on under my pillow and just veg out and listen to music, And it was the same thing. It was listening to, R&B radio at the time, or pop radio, and anything and everything. So,
well, in the AM, you go back to those songs like Brewer and Shipley, a lot of that early 70, 71, 72 pop stuff, and then it was all mixed in. You had Cat Stevens, but then you had the Shy Lights, and then you had the Delphonics.
Yeah.
And then you had Sail Cat, Motorcycle Mama pop up after that. Like, where the hell did that? Now I look at it and go, that's a train wreck. But back then, that's how we listened.
That's how we listened. Yeah.
Listen to it all. We didn't label it as kids. It was like, I like that song. Dickie Goodman, Energy Crisis, followed up by Led Zeppelin. Who does that today?
That's right. And listen, that's beautiful. You mentioned that, because I have a show that's on Radio Quark by Richie Conti. He calls it the swing set, but he goes back, and the reason I took his show was because he went back to the early 40s, with dance music then, and I thought, I got to put this on Radio Quark, because not for nothing, at the very least, it's educational for dance people to know, hey man, people were doing, dances in the 40s and dancing to this, going to clubs and listening to this stuff.
Yeah, the big bands, man.
The big band era and stuff like that. So,
Tommy Dorsey.
So we say, for you and I, and most people, they think that, dance music is disco and started in the 70s, and you and I would know better to know, you got to go back even further than that.
Well, I was reading a really good story because I know when you were the adjunct professor at New York, you were teaching the business of music, and anybody who's in the music business, I don't care what end you're in, I don't care if you're an artist, if you work in the label, if you want to own a label, you had to read Ahmet Ertegun's book.
Oh, sure.
You had to read that. That was the Bible at that time, 30 something years ago, whatever it was. And he talks about that it is the business of music, and you've got to understand the business of music. And we were talking earlier about Kano with I'm Ready, and how now you hear it 18,000 times a day on a Geico commercial.
That's true. It's there it is.
So how did Kano, because that's the very beginnings for you, really, with Emergency Records, goes back to what, 79, 80 when you
Emergency Records, I believe, was begun around 79, 80. It was originally put together by a record company in Italy called Baby Records. They were releasing their club dance records, Italian disco records in Italy, but they couldn't get them released here in the States, and they didn't know anybody. They didn't have distribution set up like we had at the time. So they were off in Italy. And so what they did was, as a way of getting their material here, I think they contracted with another industry legend and a fine gentleman named Roy B. Roy B had a small, Roy B had an incredible history. I mean, he was at many labels before and was very well known. So when Baby, did the deal with him, his sole purpose was to get their Italian records released in America, or get them to the attention through the DJ network of creating a buzz so that Baby could possibly license the record, whether to another label. Mm-hmm. When they couldn't do that, they formed Emergency Records to get them out themselves, and that was the beginning of Emergency. So the first records released on Emergency were big records in Italy by, I think it was DD Sound, had a song called Cafe. Max Berlin was on there early. And I think the first 12-inch that was released on Emergency was Billy Moore, I believe, was the name, song. Well, Billy Moore was the artist. I'm trying to remember who the song was, but that was the first 12-inch. Because I know them by catalog numbers, Sal, because I was the one who put all the catalog.
Go numbers. Dance? Was it called Go Dance?
Yeah, Go Dance. That's it, exactly. And that would have been catalog probably 6501 at the time.
Yes, that's weird. See, people in the industry, when you read your label, you don't know anything about it other than catalog number. And me, I gauge everything by, well, that was 40 pounds ago. See, I had my own catalog.
I hear you.
That was 37 pounds ago.
Right.
So I had my own system.
That's funny. That's very funny, Sal. Yeah. So, and the reason I gave out the catalog numbers because I was the one who was setting up the distribution network and and so I had to put the catalogs out and then solicit all the distributors. But I think Kano was, if I'm not mistaken, was 6504. So
this is 6503. 6503 released in 79, according to Discogs.
Right.
Now, Discogs,
sort of hit or miss sometimes. But
kind of like Wikipedia,
Right.
When they tell people that I'm 6'4", I'm wondering who the hell gave them that information.
But that's great that, I mean, look how far we've come that you can just pull something up that quick to get it. Bam!
And bring it on the screen.
Right. It's great.
I don't need no union projectionist. I can do my own thing.
Yeah. So Billy Moore came out, and we had a little success with it, and then we licensed this record. We decided to release Kano, which it really is just a wonderful song, and it started to take off. I think it was very unique in the vocoder sounds and I'm ready. I mean, people just didn't know what to make of this thing. So, I was working promotion at the time. Funny story about, look, there was only, by that time, Roy B was out of the picture. An Italian DJ, Sergio Cosa, who worked for Baby Records, went back to Italy. Baby Records came to America for a Billboard disco convention back in 79, 80.
Before they called it a new music seminar.
Before they called it new music, but there was these Billboard dance conventions, and I think that was, Baby Records came, and I think they sort of got disenchanted about the whole scene and stuff like that. So I think at that point after the convention, they wanted out. And Sergio, who was a DJ and who always wanted to come to America, saw that as an opportunity to come to America. So they went back to Italy for a while, and in that there was a couple of months there where there were no releases on Emergency, but then come to find out that Sergio had ended up purchasing the company, or taking the debt basically from Baby Records, who wanted out. So Sergio came back to America and called me, and we got together, and then we became Emergency Records. We structured a deal and we became Emergency Records. And that's when, Sergio, through people he knew through his being a DJ, met up with Stefano Polga and Ninzati and all these people who were friends of his. And that's how we got the Kano record and started putting it out. And it was just Sergio and I at the time. So Sergio was doing a lot of the administrative and the A&R for the label. And I was handling all the distribution and marketing and promotion. And it was, like I said, it was just the two of us. So I had to come up with different names to promote the record. So if I was calling R&B radio stations, I was this guy. If I was calling pop records, I was this guy. And it was the only way I could tell, who was calling me back, by who they asked for.
That name, right? That's right. That's like that scene in Used Cars when Kurt Russell's selling cars. So you got a Hispanic guy. Hey, what's your name? Hi, my name's Jesus. Hey, Rudy Villanueva, how you doing? And then an Asian comes up to you. Hey, my name's. Hey, what's your name? It's so. And then Kurt Russell says, "Oh, my name's Rudy Tai Kim."
That's funny.
And then an African American guy walks up to him and says, "Hey, I see you looking at that cherry car over there. What's your name?" He says, "My name's Joe Smith." He goes, "Hey, Rudy Washington Carver, what's up, man?" So he changed his name every time.
Everyone. Yeah.
And
that's what I did, because I had to make it look like we were a bigger company, and then we were having some success, and that we knew who to, but it was a way for me to say, oh, if they're calling for this guy, it must be an R&B station.
Well, It's a War was the first release, right? Because I remember It's a War and Tantra were fighting each other on the charts. Hills of Kathmandu.
Hills of Kathmandu.
I mean, and that talk about like a 15-minute theme. I mean,
that was fun. I mean, the gentleman who ran that label, Mike Wilkinson, Captain Mike, was just a wonderful man. And
what was that? Import? What was the label's name again?
Yeah, the label, it was Import 12.
Import 12, right.
Import 12. They had Import 12 and Sugar Scoop Records. Believe it or not, I worked with Mike Wilkinson. I worked with him and Raul Rodriguez. They actually, those labels came out of a function of a subscription DJ service they had, which was called DiscoNet. Mm-hmm. If you recall, they used to get DJs to do splicing and eating and make these special edits.
Mickey Oliver did one. Yeah,
that's right. That's right. A lot of the guys, and then they would put it on these DiscoNet series, and he had subscribers. And ironically, these programs, if you could find them, are worth a lot of money today, from what I hear.
Well, if you remember a long time ago, before the internet, "Lay All Your Love on Me" by ABBA. That DiscoNet version was going for $200+.
Huge.
Lisa's Jump Shout was going for $200+ as well. And then you had those medleys too. Some of those medleys that were just phenomenal. And when you talk DiscoNet, that was like one of the original first remix services before Ultimix, before Razor made. What's the guys up in Boston been around? X-Mix. I mean,
X-Mix. No, it was before that. I think the only two services I remember that were very big were DiscoNet, and I think there was one on the West Coast.
Really?
Yeah, there was another one. The name, I'm not sure if it Razor.
Oh, Razormaid.
Razormaid, yeah.
Yeah.
See? They were on the West.
Yeah, and they were doing more alternative stuff. Everything they had was colored vinyl. Everything was colored vinyl. You had, man, I'll tell you, which was a huge record here in Chicago, was Vicious Pink, Can't You See?
Right.
Was on that clear plastic Razormaid. There was You Spin Me Around. Telex, too, Raised by Snakes was on that. And then there
Yeah,
was,
so it was these two companies that were doing all these mixes, remixes or edits. They were really edits at the time. They weren't getting their hands on the masters, so to speak, to do
right,
remixes. But they had like great DJs who would just go in, and back in the old days, they take everything and splice it together and put it together. And that was a new version.
yeah, Mickey Oliver had about 60,000 feet of reel-to-reel tape on his feet on his floor in his house. It was Mickey's house up in the attic when he lived out.
Funny, remember? And it's funny because these guys, they would go do it, cut it, and hang it, and they would know exactly which beat it was. It was amazing to watch them
Yeah,
work. I know DiscoNet had Raul Rodriguez was one of the big ones who eventually, so I was with them for a while, and then Import 12 started, and we did a couple of records on Import 12, and then Sugar Scoop. But I was there to help them go through their releases all the way up to Man Parish Hip Hop Bebop.
yeah, and he posts some great stuff, man.
He
Man
does.
Parish's
He's
page.
a very good friend of mine. I talk to him still to this day, and he'll credit me with breaking that record for him because I really worked that record hard for him.
Man, I tell you, it
became a classic.
Hip hop bebop, there was nothing like it at that time.
No.
And then Heat Stroke came out, and that was more of a high energy. It was high energy,
right?
But when you were up there playing in the 130s, 128 to 132s, Heat Stroke was part of your set as a club DJ back then.
Sure. I think if I'm not mistaken, Heat Stroke was done for a
porn
movie, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So. That's our boy, Man Parish.
Yeah, I'm trying. We go back and forth trying to get him scheduled. I'd love to be able to get him on too.
He's got some amazing stories.
Oh yeah, he had a great post, Curtis, this week about the emulator, and he did a story about the old emulator, and how he, what he used when he did it for Boogie Down Bronx and stuff like.
Right.
I mean, you talk. I mean, there's another track, man, Boogie Down Bronx too.
Yep.
I mean, how hard did that hit in New York when you were out?
And listen, that if you talk to anyone from the rap era, early rap days, when you go back to Grandmaster Flash, and you go back to Africa Bambaataa and all those guys and that Zulu crew.
That was like everybody that Tommy Silverman had hiding in his
That's
truck.
right. But that boogie down Bronx track is like it was in all their bins, man. They had to have that record.
And Two Sisters, High Noon.
High Noon, yeah.
So let's get back to Emergency. Shannon, how did Shannon wind up coming to you? When how did that happen?
Yeah, we had funny enough, Shannon started with a DJ visiting me. Well, not really visiting. It was a young Chris Barbosa who actually called me one day because Chris Barbosa went to elementary school with my brother in the Bronx.
Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
6 degrees, 3 degrees of separation.
Right. So he called up and said, because that he got to me. And so he called up, and he was just becoming a bedroom DJ, so to speak, and he wanted records. And so I said, well, look, if you know my brother and stuff, sure, why don't you come on down to Emergency and I'll give you some records. So he started coming down on a regular basis just to pick up records, so he could make tapes and things like that. Mm-hmm. And then from that, just through conversations, he decided he wanted to produce something. So I said, well, why don't you dabble a little bit with something and bring it down to me? And so I remember one day he brought me a cassette reel. At that time, Sal, we had cassettes, right? So he brought me a cassette. He dropped a cassette on my desk and he said, listen to this. Let me know what you think. And the actual title was Fire and Ice. And so I listened to it. And I said, you mind if I hold on to this? I'm going to keep it for a couple of days. And he said, no. And Sergio and I got together and I said, Sergio, I want you to do me a favor. Can you listen to this cassette? Because there was something in the cassette that I heard that I said, sounds very interesting. And the part that was very interesting in there was a little thing that went, do, 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 do. And it just kept repeating over and over. So I gave it to, I said, Sergio, listen. So Sergio listened to it, mm-hmm. and I guess he felt the same. He knew he felt something there. At that time, we were just starting our relationship with Mark Liggett, and so we thought, wouldn't it be a good idea, just because we have this young kid, Chris Barbosa, who's never been in the studio, versus Mark Liggett, who's been in the studio. Let's see what would happen if we put them both together, and they took this fire and ice. And so they went into the studio, and with Mark's expertise and Chris's, ability to say, this is what I want it to sound like, they came back with a track that said, we said, oh, this is very good. Let's see if we can get someone to write this. So then we contacted other friends, and they wrote the song, Let the Music Play. So now we have this track and this song that sounded decent, and pretty good. And we were like, okay, this sounds good. Let's get someone to sing it. And so I remember we put an ad in Backstage at the time, newspaper.
Yeah.
And we rented a studio, and our never forget, 13 vocalists came in, and we had them rehearse it, and then we had them come in and sing for us, and to sing Let the Music Play. And it turned out, and we recorded a few of them, and we went back and we discussed it, and we listened to it over and over. And then at the end of it all, I think we all had a general consensus that the one who sounded at least the best of the best was this girl who was a bookkeeper's assistant from Brooklyn named Brenda Green. Shannon Green was her name. And so we figured, all right, let's try this one, and so we made a deal. We paid Shannon, work for hire, and everybody was happy, and it was on, everybody was on their way. No problem. It was just going to be another single for Emergency Records. It was, Shannon went back to being a bookkeeper's assistant in Brooklyn. We had a track, and I remember we put it out, Sal, and within days, I mean, the record exploded. It was so. It just took us by. We were shocked. I mean, we could see it just happening. Like everybody, whatever it was, it caught the seam in the universe, and it just took off. And so now we had to go back and get Shannon to come in and sign a deal with us and everything. And that was a whole different process. It wasn't easy, but eventually we all reached agreement, and then this record just blew up. And at that time, it was really a 12-inch. That I was working through the independent distribution system. I had no 7-inch or no concept, and even no budgets to go to radio for this thing. But we got the attention of Atlantic, to Jerry Greenberg over at Atlantic Records, who was actually, had his own little imprint called Mirage Records.
Yeah.
Who had the system.
That's where Kano wound up.
Right. That's where they wound up eventually. But Jerry Greenberg, called us up, and I'll never forget. He called us up, and if you'll remember, I had been selling a lot of 12 inches here at the time, and at that time, Shannon was our 40th release on Emergency. It was 6540. And so I had 39 other records out through this independent distribution system, which also owed us a lot of money. So, so I was using Shannon to collect other money. I said, yeah, you want more records, you better pay me what you owe me,
Yeah.
And so it was a good thing going. And then Mirage came, and then they wanted to release it. And I remember sitting with Sergio, and I said, look, we could do a deal with Atlantic. We really could. And believe me, I'm all for it. But if we do this deal with Atlantic, and we take away the one big record, the first big record that we ever had through this distribution system, you could forget about ever going back there again. Because that's what we're going to be known for. The minute we get a hit, we take it away from them. So there's got to be another way. And so we sat down, and what we ended up structuring was a very unique deal in which we were able, as Emergency Records, to keep the 12-inch rights. We allowed Mirage Atlantic to take the 7-inch and work it to radio. And then we had an option for an album deal with Atlantic. But in the album deal, if Atlantic was to release an album, if their song took off, we still had the rights to do subsequent 12 inches through Emergency. So we had this very unique deal.
For that time. Yeah,
for that time period, it was very unique, and it worked
on that one.
Yeah. Well, you had to be very creative, and you had to, it was just, you had to survive, right? So we did that, and the record, Jerry Greenberg and the Mirage and Atlantic team blew that record up. I mean, it went, when it's all said and done, I think that record was a number 8 pop record. And Shannon still, up until recently because of the pandemic, but still tours around the world singing Let the Music Play.
Last time I saw her, I had seen her a long time ago. Tony Batoy does a lot of shows here in Chicago. Tony was doing a flashback party and the Riviera here, and so many artists had come in through the Riv. I mean, Tony, you name it. Tony brought in everybody from TKA to house artists to Shannon to Technotronic, Rob Bass, whatever it was. Tony was bringing them in here, and Shannon was in. I hadn't seen her. I think the last time we saw her, Urgent just got released. It was probably the last time I saw her.
I love that.
So it was about the last time I saw her. She didn't remember me, but she played along as if she did, so it was good. I fake mine every now and then too. So
right. But yeah, I still keep in touch with her. We talk about sometimes doing another record together and stuff like that. But she's had a marvelous run, and she's worked hard too. She looks great. I'm really proud of how far she's come. I'm proud of the work we all did with that, and I still have gold records on my wall. Remind me of the time period and stuff like that. But it was a fun time. It really was.
Well, the amount of when you get hit and slammed with a hit record out of nowhere, you can't prepare for it. But then now, like you said, you got labels and just everybody calling you, and you owe me $36,000 over there at the distributor. You can sell $100,000 worth of this. Give me my 36. I'll give you this. I mean, so many things change once you get hit with a hit record.
That's right.
And all the opportunities, and then you got to make sure you pick the right door to go in, because if you go down the wrong door, you can just lose it all too. And you get dinner, but no more breakfast after that ever.
Yeah, and you also got to strike while the iron's hot. I mean, we really went from Shannon to Xena to a bunch of other songs, which was very nice to see. And listen, it's a tough business today, so you gotta get it while it's hot.
And the with Shannon, then there was the follow-ups, and the videos were great. I mean, Let the Music Plays a performance video. It's on a sound stage.
Right.
Give Me Tonight's video was really you had special effects. You had all kinds. You must have got a little extra dough for that video, because it was once you do that, and once you get into that major label system, and a lot of other people get involved. You went from being just Sergio and I, two guys, who just had a passion for dance music and disco music and things like that, to all of a sudden you walk into Atlantic Records and there's everybody's got to have and everybody's on the phone connected. Like when I was
my favorite, Sal, my favorite is, now it's their record, it's my record,
you're just here.
Right.
You used to be the father. No,
right. No, this is my record now. They get very possessive of it, and you're like, yeah, okay. But at the end of the day, you go, hey, look, we still own the rights.
Yeah, I mean, here's another great video. Do you want to get away? I mean,
do you want to get away? Which is a fabulous, just a great song too.
Yeah, well, that sound when that dub version turned up on that 12-inch you put on that, there was no real such thing as a dub version in that manner. Making Music had one that what's his name put out on his label on Radar, Eric Matthews. But there was nothing done at that level that Liggett or that they did. With all the drops and the ends and when that shit came in, it hit so hard when you got and then bam, that kick in. and which became the basis literally for all what used to be called heartthrob, then became freestyle, and that,
Freestyle, yeah,
you know,
it's amazing, but we didn't know that at the time. We
at
were
the
just
time, right?
right. We were just going for what sounded good to us and what we hope people would love. You'd never know that. We didn't set out and say, all right, we're going to start this whole new genre of music. We just
It doesn't work that way.
It
Exactly.
just doesn't work that way, right? And
Yeah.
and all this, and now people will come back and say, "Oh, yeah, you had the first freestyle record." I go, "Man, maybe we did, maybe we didn't. I don't know."
Yeah.
You know,
They're still beating each other up over who had the first house
I
hustle
don't
record.
know. Listen. I'm just happy. I'm happy and proud to be part of it, and have done something to contribute to the success of it.
Mhm.
It's the same way I do with Quark or did with house music and things like that. It just keep going. Again, I just do what I like.
Well, I gotta imagine it probably felt like a freight train all of a sudden, because you go from sharing an office with an aardvark and an air conditioner to all of a sudden you got 800 people working your record, and you're in calls, and all of a sudden now you got to have more content, more product. Because I had read a really funny story about CNC and how it reminds you probably what you had to go through. They have Everybody Dance now. They release it, they put it out, not expecting anything. Within like an hour, Columbia says, "Hey, we need an album in 30 minutes. Get an album." You don't have the
Yeah,
content yet. You weren't ready for it.
it's exactly the same. Back in the day, as um, you weren't making much money off a single. It was album driven and so forth. I mean, the pricing. So it was almost like throw an album together in 13 hours, my friend. We got to get this out.
Yeah,
You
and you
know,
had to have a friend who owned the studio to save you some dough.
it was, and they're not easy. They're not easy to do, especially if you're trying to do good quality, songs and stuff like that. That's the reason why you'll find an album back then, that had maybe one or two good songs, and then you had 9 other songs on it that just were crap. So because people threw these things together quickly.
Yeah, and and we go back to disco. When you talk about people think disco was just like disco, most of those producers were some of the most ingenious, talented producers on the face of the earth at that time. And when you go back to Giorgio was the first guy in the studio to ever use 96 tracks digital.
Right.
Nobody even knew what that meant except him. And
That's right.
And he was a disco guy,
That's
whatever.
right. And it was amazing. I mean, think about it. If you listen to a lot of those disco records, they were using full orchestras I mean, the strings come in and real instruments, real piano. It was insane,
And studio musicians and studio singers like
That's
music.
right.
What was it? Music was what? Jocelyn Brown, right?
Right.
And whoever else. They were studio singers.
That's right.
The producer, no different than today, no different than a house producer bringing in a singer to sing a song. They did the same thing. But see, here in Chicago, I think the problem with the disco scene was, and I know because I was there, it pissed a lot of rock and roll dudes off because no longer could they get booked in a club.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. They were losing their job to DJs. Then all of a sudden, they resented the fact that you had to pay a cover charge to get into a joint to see some guy play records. That pissed them off.
Right. Sure.
And they had no respect for them. They didn't even know who was making the music. They just hated it because it wasn't their friend playing one chord really bad to a drummer who couldn't keep a tempo if you put a clicker in his ear and beat him over the head with it. So there was...
Sal, when you put it that way, I'd be pissed too.
Well, because I watched more rock clubs disappear. Right. And I watched more guys who were in bands losing their gigs to clubs that were converting over to discos.
Sure.
And I understood them being pissed. I guess, well, yeah, I'd be mad if I lost a job, but I didn't understand them shitting on the music. You know?
It had nothing to do with the music. It was just something different, right?
Yeah, it didn't make any sense to me.
Their scene away, their venues.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it was.
Yeah, and really all those guys wanted to do was just make money, right?
Yeah.
And there's no doubt it was easier just to put in a sound system and get a DJ for $35 a night. It's a fixed cost, wasn't it?
If you were lucky to get, sometimes you just got free Pepsi, free Cokes, and whatever, what other party favors they threw your way, and a girl or a guy, depending.
Listen, back when I was in college, it's funny. My college roommate, who got me my job in the music business, because he had been in the business, and he went on to have some tremendous success. But he was a DJ at a small little bar in the town that we went to college in upstate New York. And then, when we both left college, we decided to go back to work. I got a job in the mailroom of a record label that he had worked in. So the record label that he got me a job in the mailroom was, at that time, they were called, they had just changed their name from Midland International to Midsong International. And they had, you talk about early disco days, they had Doctor's Orders by Carol Douglas, Silver Convention, Fly Robin Fly.
Yeah, you're talking 74 to 75.
Yeah. And I came in, I think it was, I'm about 76, 77. So we had Wardell Piper, Captain Boogie, and the Touch of Class guys, and and that's where I sort of started learning the business. But my roommate, who was his name is Corey Robbins, who went on to start Profile Records and eventually got to run DMC. But he did a couple. He produced a couple of great songs. Front Page.
Sharon Red was still with them for Love Insurance.
All those, and so
all right, God rest her soul.
Yeah, so we were sort of I remember Corey and I just first reading of Billboard magazine. We used to test each other. I like, dude, what's number 17 on the chart this week? And he'd have to tell me all right, it's this song, it's by this artist, it's on this label. And if you were really good, you'd say, oh really? All right, what's the catalog number? So
you're right back to your catalog. You and your catalog numbers.
So here we were in college, and we were supposed to be in intro to law class, but him and I just goof it off and said, dude, we're not going to last that long here. He goes, let's go get a job at a record company. And so, and then we've been in the music business ever since those days. But, that again, you remember like how those type of records and what they sounded like. And even, record like Fly Robin Fly, when it comes on, it's boom, 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 boom. And, you're like, yeah, this is jamming, man. This is great.
And it was so simple. It was
so simple, but it just still to this day.
Because as a kid, when I used to think I was a musician, I took every instrument, Curtis. My dad was a horn player, so he wanted me to play the trumpet. I played the trumpet briefly, drove my mother nuts. Then I played is it the oboe? Oh, the baritone. And it was bigger than me, and I was so little, I fell off the chair in band in 4th grade. So that wasn't good. I couldn't even get up. The thing was like, help. So then I went to guitar. But when I got to guitar, I would also use it as a bass. And I went from Smoke on the Water, because what idiot didn't play Smoke on the Water when they had their instrument, to Fly Robin Fly. And then I tried to get down the night. I didn't know at the time that they had sped that up, that they sped the track up to get the guitar to sound that way. So I was like, why can't I get my damn guitar I literally broke my guitar trying to get that sound.
Trying to get the sound.
Yeah, but when you hear those things, there's certain things in the songs, just like Shannon, when you're that bass line, and when you hear these things, those are immediate. As a DJ, those things, bam, people hear that.
Those are the things I like to look for. That's why you'll hear like in Kano, you hear that sound like which leads to
Curtis Man Drunk.
You got to get that. Shannon is that boom, something real quick, and let's get in, let's get out, and let's get people's attention.
What was the drum machine? What did they use on that? What did they use on? You remember?
No, I don't even remember.
No,
I don't even remember it. Those were the geniuses of the producers. The beauty of it, and I still do it to this day, is with records I release, with songs I release, and music I release, is I knew there was a fine line, and this was the line, man. If you want to work with me, and you're going to produce records and you're going to produce music, then you got to be all that. You got to go in and produce the music, and I won't bother you. I won't question you. I won't even come into the studio. Just give me the best you got, because then when you give me the best you have, then when you give it to me, I'm going to give you the best I have, and I'm going to get that record out all over the world for you.
Hey, you scratch my back, you show me you're real,
Yeah.
I'll show you I'm real.
And that's the beauty of our partnership. It's, let's get to work. Let's look at our strengths and, and go right. Let's play right up to our strengths here.
Well, speaking of, we were talking about licensing. Was Shannon able to be licensed overseas? Who wound up taking the license? How did you wind up getting Let the Music Play and Giving the Night overseas? Because it was an international hit. I mean,
yeah, it was a huge hit. I mean, licensing, plays both ways. But when you get into, I think we had a few licensing deals in place already as a label with different companies overseas. And sometimes back then that was a way of, like, if you released a song or a record and you knew it was going to come out in France and stuff, it was a way of getting early money in to just stay afloat, to pay the bills, so to speak, right? That was where you made your money. So I think we already had a few licensing deals in place that people had options on records. So, I mean, everybody wanted the Shannon record, but then I know that I remember that when we went to Atlantic and we had to structure a deal, we had to go back to our international partners and request those rights back.
Oh God, yeah.
We had to give it to at Mirage Atlantic globally, because they had their offices around the world. So if you wanted to have a big hit, globally, you just couldn't piecemeal it out. You had to really be all in.
You literally go back, grab it, and give it to Atlantic because they were already. They had they had presence everywhere. Whereas you cut a deal with somebody who had presence that you didn't have, and all of a sudden, you have presence everywhere through that.
It's like anything; it was just another negotiation thing. We had to go back and we had to explain to them, that by virtue of by giving this back to us and allowing us to make this deal, you'll still, be involved with us, and you don't want to lose the fact that we may have others, so but in all fairness, we had some great partners. We had people who really believed in Emergency Records, believed in Sergio and myself, and listen, we were always very honest guys. That's why we've lasted in the business as long as we did. Sergio's still in the business in Italy, still as a music publisher, and oversees all the rights to the Emergency publishing catalog. So, so when you hear Tag Team or, Woot There It Is, or you hear Shannon, or you hear any of these on commercials or in films, it's Sergio and one of our administrators, Shapiro Bernstein Company, they're responsible for a lot of that.
And that's the business of music that a lot of people need to understand. If you're going to get in, you have to get that shit has to be taken care of, or else everybody's going to make money off of your work, but you.
That's right. And those are the things I taught for many years, at NYU, teaching the business of music publishing. And I had to learn that stuff like anyone else. I mean, no one was teaching us those things back in the day. There were no books, and there were none of these things, access to the internet and so forth. You really learned as you went along. And I have a great story about that. When I first opened up Quark, remember I told you I started off in Midsong Records at the time, and the building that I worked in, you'll appreciate this, is there were two buildings in New York that were the music industry buildings. There was the Brill building where all the songwriters and publishers hung out. And then there was another building a block away, 1650 Broadway. That's where everyone was, all the major companies. I mean, you'd walk into that building and there were just artists walking back and forth. So that's where I started working, in the 1650 Broadway building. And when I started Quark Records, I needed to get a desk and a phone somewhere. And so I went back to that building and I started on the top floor and started walking around, knocking on doors, asking people, do you have any space to rent? I just need a desk and a phone. And I was fortunate enough that these two elderly gentlemen who opened the door, said, "Hey man, why don't you come in?" I talked to them for 20 minutes. I told them what I was doing. They said, "Well, we have this desk right here. Why don't you rent this out?" And I figured I'll rent it out for a couple of months and see how this Quark thing goes, you know. And meanwhile, all these years later, I'm still going with this Quark thing.
Still quarking it.
But the funniest thing is, you know, I put my phone on the desk, and the next day I was busy. I was busy, and I would get there at 9:30 in the morning, and these guys would stroll in. These two guys, they would stroll in like at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? I'm like, how does that work? You know, they had a room to the side, and so, but every day I was there, I was getting the mail, and I would check the mail, and I was getting bills, and these guys were getting checks. I'm getting bills, they're getting checks. And I'm like, no, this is not going to work out so well. So I asked them when they came in, I said, "Do you guys have like 20 minutes or so to talk to me?" I said, "What do you guys do?" You know, and I went into their room, and they had a piano, and they had sheet music and all this stuff. These guys, they were transcribers. They would take music that people wrote, and they would create lyric sheets and sheets for musicians. But they also were songwriters. This guy wrote hundreds of songs, but he wrote one song, and that one song was "Twist and Shout."
Oh God!
Twist and Shout. So hence that should explain the checks every day he was getting.
60 plus years, Jesus.
Oh my God! And so he began to explain to me the power of music publishing and songwriting, and I listened very carefully. And the next day, I was in the music publishing business, and I never forgot. You know, and I've learned a lot from it, and I know the power of good partnerships with songwriters and co-publishers and labels and so forth. It gave me a different view of looking at it, rather than just being a label and trying to have a hit record. You know,
well, it's multiple revenue streams,
right?
The importance of that is knowing that 30, 40 years down the line, somebody could take that, put it in a movie. Guess what? They got to pay you. Somebody can use that on Geico. Guess what?
That's right.
Oh, you had a bad day? F you, pay me. Oh, you had a bad week? You know, it's like the line in Goodfellas. Doesn't matter. You're going to use it, pay me. And that's the importance of the revenue stream.
That's all.
The industry. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes you never know where it comes from. I had 3 of my songwriters call me this week alone. They just got their BMI checks, and they got paid for a film that I did that I put their music in years back that came out in Japan. And all of a sudden today they get, this week they get paid, and they're like, "Dude, this is great. We just got our check." I'm like, that's the power of using music over and over again.
And I see it with that, but I also see, like, from movies that I've worked on, when I get my residuals, and I'm like, what movie is that from? And then I look, and it's everything's itemized in a list. Everything's itemized, so you know what. But then you're thinking to yourself, Jesus, it's like 27 years ago. I'm still. It's like the gift that keeps on giving.
That's the beauty of it, and that's why you remind people, just write your songs. You're the owner. Choose your partners wisely, and just go off to the races. Just have fun, but just keep doing it. Just be passionate about it, and just keep writing and become best at it. And who knows?
Briefly, because I had noticed you worked with Bobby Womack. You've worked with Bobby Womack in his career, and I mean, it's pretty diverse. I mean, you went from Deborah Gibson to Kid Rock to Bobby Womack to Roger Daltrey. How does that happen?
Well, I worked. It's funny. I worked at a company that raised a lot of money back in at that time in New Jersey. A company was called Continuum Records. So how that happens is I worked at EMI Records with the guy in the marketing department, and then EMI closed, and he went to work for Continuum in New Jersey, and then he called me up and said, "Come work," and that's where we signed Kid Rock, early Kid Rock,
real early.
Yeah, we got a chance to and the guy who was running that label is really he was from Europe, he was from the UK, and he had a thing really for older, old time rock and roll guys to him, like, which Roger Daltrey and stuff like that. So, they raised a lot of money, and so he had a lot of money, and so he wanted to do a record with Roger Daltrey. I think we ended up doing a concert at Carnegie Hall. Get this, we did a concert at Carnegie Hall to celebrate Roger Daltrey's, I guess, birthday. Yeah, his birthday. I think it was his 50th birthday. And we brought in all these artists to record Who songs. And we actually got Pete Townsend and John Entwistle to come and perform, hoping that we can get them on stage together.
To capture that.
But it never happened. But they were also on the bill with Eddie Vedder, Kate, who's the girl from Linda Perry from Four Non Blondes?
Kate Bush.
Kate Bush wasn't on that one, but we ended up I think we did a DVD on that. It was a concert that we taped, but we did that show. I mean, it was just insane, the things we did. But the highlight of that whole experience, that continuum, was the fact that they, because they did a jazz album with Charlie Watts from the Stones, which was beautiful. Bernard Fowler did the vocals. He was a background vocalist for the Stones on their tour. And so Charlie Watts. And so two of my highlights is, I had to meet with Charlie Watts. And so I flew to London and was in the office, Rolling Stones office, and talking to Charlie Watts about his new album and what we were going to do and how we were going to do it and so forth. And there was a knock at the door, and Mick Jagger popped his head in. And, it's one of those moments where you go, holy shit, that's Mick Jagger, man.
And you don't want to let it know.
Right, yeah. You got to stay cool. Like, listen, I've worked with a lot of major artists, from OJs and people like that, being at majors and stuff. But it's Mick Jagger, man, And I was starstruck, So that was one moment. And then through this label, the next moment was really getting a chance to hang out and become really friends with Bobby Womack, who I grew up with as an old R&B soul guy and listened to some Across 110th Street and all those old songs that he did that I used to listen to on R&B radio. And so all of a sudden, to be spending time with him, to be sitting with him, to be traveling with him, and to hear his stories, where it's like I just still think, rest his soul, I would still hear him like, so, hey, Kurt, what about, he always called me Kurt. He never fill out the whole rest of my name, Curtis. He'd say, hey, Kurt, I remember back, I was talking to this guy. And he'd go into a story and you'd be sitting there mesmerized, just some good time. So that's the one thing I love about being in the music business is, you're just riding along, and then all of a sudden you're in front of Bruce Springsteen, or you're in front of this guy, and you're like, how cool is this?
Yeah, you're running a circle, but you don't realize you're in the circle you're running because you're either working with them or on a project for them. So at that point, you're
it just happens. It just happens, and then at that point you just got to stay cool and just do your thing and have some fun.
When we go back to Emergency here, because the one record that really, for all the club DJs and in the mix show DJs, I don't care if they were in Seattle, I don't care if they were in Miami, I don't care if they were in Portland, Maine, or even if you were at X Rock at 91.5 and down in San Diego down there, you knew I Love My Radio by Taffy. So the one question I really, because I remember I had bought the import when the import originally came,
right?
And it was an Italian import. It had it had everything, but it had that rock guitar in it too, and the pressing was so on the original import. It was very hard and mid-rangey, but then you guys got a hold of it. So how did you wind up picking I Love My Radio and then bringing I Love My Radio into the studio to give it the sound that it had?
Yeah, we were getting a lot of records from overseas, from people who knew, number one, we had just come off hits, with Shannon and On the Upside and things like that. So we were pretty much well known throughout the circuit by our visits to music functions overseas and things like that. Plus, the real value of our company was our distribution system in America. Like, we were tight with a lot of distributors and so forth. So we were getting like just so much music coming our way. And like anything, Sergio and I would sit and have these meetings and listen. We put a bottle of wine down and, a little prosciutto and, melon and just, hang
Nice.
out. Yeah, we just hang out. Maybe we'd have a pasta lunch or a pasta dinner, and just start playing music. And I mean, if you didn't hear "I Love My Radio," you were like, you had to be deaf, because there was just, it was just catchy. It, and we knew it, and Sergio knew it, and so we made the deal for the record, but we had the same feeling that you just mentioned, which is, it, and we knew DJs were playing the record, so it made it a bit easier. But we just couldn't get past the quality of the pressing and the things like that. So that was the most important thing. And I think I think Herb, we worked with Frankfurt Wayne Mastering Facility in New
That's
York.
where I did all my where I did all my stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and we had, the man who we nicknamed the Pump, Herb Pump Powers.
Yeah.
And we knew we were in good hands once we get it into the studio with him, that he was going to give us the sound we were looking for. And to his credit, as well as to ours, we knew that every record that we were going to release, it had to sound good for the clubs. That's what we were putting gearing our releases for the DJs and so forth. So that was important. So we really knew that if we came out with a superior, mastering and superior pressing of this, and we wanted to use virgin vinyl to press it and so forth, so it sounded nice and crisp and warm, that there was no way people were not going to play it, and the record just had a very nice run.
Well, anytime anything came out in emergency, it was like, even back in the day, when you saw something on Prelude, you bought it. When you saw something on Emergency, you bought it. Whether it was Funky Bebop by Vin Z or Love's Gonna Be on Your Side, you bought it. You just bought it. As a DJ, you bought it. And they were commercial dance records enough too, where people would buy them too. When I say people, not like we're not people, but the goal is, any record label is not only just to sell music that DJs play, but to get people to go buy your record. Still in the record business, you're in the business of music, and everything that came off of Emergency was just amazingly. It was commercial, but it was commercial. But so was Donna Summer. Rumor has it. It didn't mean we weren't going to go buy it, either as a DJ or as a record consuming public. They were great records that, and I Love My Radio, just like Let the Music Play. I mean, this thing set a standard. When you heard those synths, the synth come in on the remix, Jesus, I mean, that was it. People would just run like a herd of buffalo to the floor, because they knew exactly. It had such impact.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, because I mean, look, to this day, I visit clubs. I spent time in clubs. I know the way I react to a song when I hear it, and not just an Emergency song, a Quark song, but any song, right? Dude, I'm like chomping at the bits to get to the dance floor, and so we have that history. We were talking about earlier. Casablanca records. I mean, if you think of some of the songs, some of the tracks that they released, and when DJs played that, I mean, I'd run to the floor. So for me, now owning a label and being part of a label is, if I could release that so that people have that same joy and that same reaction, that's what it's all about. And I happen to be at those clubs when those DJs play it, and then you see the reaction for that. You can't you can't help but get juices. So every record you want to release, you want that same kind of
Yeah.
reaction.
Yeah. Now, what did the label in Italy say? Because when you did the complete remix and literally just gutted the entire version other than the vocals, what did they say in Italy when they heard the domestic version?
I think they were pleased, and
Mhm.
I think they ended up releasing our version, re-releasing our version
Back over
overseas.
there.
Yeah, and that's happened an amazing amount of times where we would release something, fix it, and then it would get re-released in their initial territory. I mean, because I know we released several different records from around the world. The emergency catalog, if you listen to it, is just, it's not just Italian stuff, but there's a bunch of different releases that we've come up with, and I just remember just having fun picking every one of those and issuing the catalog number and knowing it was coming out, and then having to spend time with buyers at distribution companies and convincing, and they were all around the country. They were from LA to Texas to Chicago. I mean, talking to the Chicago distributors, you know who those guys are. They,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, that was it. I had to convince them sometimes to bring records in so that they can put them in. And I would say, look, I need this record in Gramophone. I need this record in, these stores in Chicago to know if I have a heartbeat. Then you have your record pools, and I had to send it to the record pools in Chicago.
Well,
And
as we went on, the amount of work you had to do as a label, because before it was just okay, radio, maybe, hopefully you get it, but the DJs. Then you had radio, then you had the DJs, then you had the mix show DJs,
right,
then you had the pools, and now you got more people to work. And then one guy says, "Well, he'll play it, but he needs it to sound this way." And then it just eventually, I don't know how anybody does it anymore. That's why I think it's easier when you have your Mixcloud, your SoundCloud, whatever, because we've gotten to a point where it's, a hit is a hit still, Curtis. You know what I mean? A hit's going to be a
right.
hit,
You can't
but
stop it.
right, but a personal listening experience, or what one person, somebody might like an acid version and have no desire to hear the regular version of something. And we've gotten to a point where that can be a reality without you having to spend 95 hours of your day making that happen. There's so many different ways now for people not only to consume but to hear a song that may not be the original version, but they simply, just like the disconnect, they may not have liked "Lay All Your Love on Me,"
Right.
but then the disconnecting version, oh, that's it, I like that version. But I can't imagine working at a major today. I just can't.
I think, Sal, the hardest period has been the period we just went through, especially talking about disco, dance records, for example. I mean, I just finished working for a couple of releases for Tony Moran, who is just another Latin Rascals, and a very dear friend of mine and stuff like that. And he wanted me to oversee some releases for him, but I mean, he was releasing 25 mixes of one track, and I was like, but because clubs had got so fragmented and there were so many different, all of a sudden, to get a record to go number one on the dance chart, you had to have 12, 20 different mixes for each guy and stuff like that, and come out weeks. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. And they were coming out with packages of the same release, but there would be like 3 different packages containing 3 different, all these different mixes. And I'm like, that's insane. And I'm so happy that we finally gotten back to, because I just release singles now, just to, I'm back to like old days of the 7-inch, just give me the
Full circle.
just give me one version, give me like a 3-minute version. Let me put that up on Spotify and be done with it. Because that's ultimately, for me, like, if you're going to have a record, that's it. That's where people are going to go. They're going to go to Spotify. They're going to go to Apple Music. And let them just hear the song, and let's go from there.
Technotronic, when Pump Up the Jam came out, and there had to be 80 something remixes between the services, and then there was that double album promo pack we got. Then there was a Billboard Reporter special package, and eventually I had like 18 pieces of. I had like 18 pieces of Pump Up the Jam. Good friend ZZ. ZZ did a lot of shows here in Chicago too. What's up, ZZ?
What's up, ZZ?
And one of my mix show guys, Harry Hernandez, who does mixes for us too. And that's the beauty of this show here, Curtis, is that we get to, not only do we get to talk about the music, but we get to talk about the business too. And
Right.
a lot of great stories that you've got. And some of the stuff, I just forgot what the hell I was talking about because I got thrown off.
We were talking about Pump Up the Jam and the 18 different packages.
So, yes, I got a story for you. It's funny. And I'm not going to say no names, but they're very dear friends of mine. And they had a cassette of, I think Jurgen, who was it? Jurgen? Somebody was wandering around with a cassette at the New Music Seminar of Pump Up the Jam. So
Right.
It's got to be 88, I think, about 88. One of the last years before they threw all of us out of the Marriott. Remember the New Music Seminar used to be at
All
the
too
Marriott.
well.
And then we were canceled. No more. It was like, you guys go. No more
Right,
New Music
right.
Seminar. So he's got this cassette in his hand and he's playing it. And he plays it for a friend of mine who's got a label. He says, what do you think? He says, I don't know. He said, how much they want? He said, they want $5,000 to license it.
Right.
He said, nah, it's too much. Pump Up the Jam. He
Right.
would have made that back in about 46 seconds. But,
Okay.
sometimes some great visionaries miss out on some shit too.
Yeah, we all have stories like that where we miss, different tracks and things like that. I mean, if you're in the business as long as we have been, Sal, you're going to have those kind of stories. So,
I prefer to stay in the back end, like you.
Right.
I nobody needed to know what the hell I was into or what I was doing. I was fine with that. I didn't care.
Right.
I'm not the singer, and I have a face for radio, so that's good for me.
Yeah,
Good work.
and I love, and listen, you did great. I mean, I love radio. I love, just visiting radio stations. From the, my first experience at it. And I had a cousin who was a radio disc jockey in New York. So I used to go up to the station to visit him. He used to do the overnights on, which was a very big popular station here in New York, WABC. He was the overnight DJ. So I would go there and then also walk over to the sister, the other sister station, WPLJ, which was the rock version.
Right.
Yeah. So, but the radio has always been very dear to my heart. And I just love visiting guys and going up to, stations like in Chicago, you mentioned them already, WBMX and GCI, where you had to get a record on if you wanted to do anything, and you had to get a record on those stations.
Well, in New York, I mean, you had KTU, you had BLS,
Right.
and KTU. I mean, in its heyday, I mean,
Back in the day.
yeah.
Right.
And again, I was a weird kid. I used to ask people to fax me I would call stores, say, "Can you fax me your playlist, your top songs?" And they would, "You're in Chicago." Yeah. So I wanted to know what everybody was playing because I wanted to understand what it was. Like here in Chicago, we were in some. You got to the South and the Southwest, they were into some funky shit, bro.
Right.
I mean, they were into stuff that you wouldn't think in the Southwest. And I'm talking Arizona, New Mexico, Lakeside. Your Lovers on the One.
Sure.
Houdini, Freaks Come Out at Night. It's like, really? That's happening out there?
That's
and then when you got
stuff too.
And then I stayed in touch with a lot of the pool guys because from what I created a system. When I had Modern Tracks, I had a system where I wanted you guys to be able to communicate with every pool director, every radio station, every record guy, had everybody's information internally in that Modern Track system, so you could expedite your releases, your information, sales information, even with the retail level. Working with Tower Records, they brought Tower Records into the system, and then I turned around and we sold it all the promo only. But our system was in '96 when we were streaming sound samples because I wanted those radio guys, the radio PDs and the MDs, to hear what the labels were doing. I thought it was important. Just like the distributors, like Watts, everybody get on the phone, and you're plugged in and you're listening to the new releases. So as a record store, you can order them. So I wanted to here you have this thing called the internet in 96. I can put those sound samples up there. Holy cow, this is great. Now the record guys can connect with this. They'll like me. They'll give me the rights to a song so I can put it on modern tracks.
Sure.
And it's like you scratch my ass, I'll scratch yours. Everybody works together to generate information. And at that time, information was really key. But we a lot of people didn't realize it yet in 95, 96, how important what we do today was going to become, because there were a lot of guys who still thought AOL was the internet, So,
yeah. It's funny. A lot of that stuff didn't happen because I remember going to work for my first internet company in, I'm going to say 2000. So there was a company called MCY, which also raised, hundreds of millions of dollars back in that period. But, I just remember my first meeting with them, and they were talking about doing this and doing that and stuff like that, and what they were going to do, and what they were going to do with this artist, and getting music to people. And I said, well, how are you going to? We're going to put this music up. And I said, well, how are you going to get that music? They go, oh, we got the artist to give it to us. I go, yeah, but the artist doesn't have the rights to that.
Right.
They sold it to the record label. You got to go to the record companies. They go, no, we don't have to go to the record companies. I'm like, oh, okay, let's see how that holds up for you guys. They eventually went bust, but you could see the writing on the wall. And the one thing that I will tell you that I learned from that experience was the business was changing rapidly, but the fact that, the attention span of people was changing too. It was really getting short. And now, sometimes the amount of time that you have, I used to tell people would be, how much time do I have, until they find the refresh button on
the hook. You got the hook.
That's it. That's all you have. You better bring it quick, because they're going to hit that refresh button and you're done. It's going to move. As I used to say to people when I was teaching at NYU, it was, the music business changed so fast. I got on the train at 59th Street, and by the time I got down to the Village, it had already changed. That's how fast it was going. It was like the wild, wild west again.
Well, the attention span, definitely. When you go back to how ratings were taken for radio stations, you used to have to send in the diaries, and there used to be call-out research. A lot of people, you get a phone call, and all it was the hook. Do you like this song? Do you know this song?
Right.
That was how radio research. You had Birch, you had Nielsen, which bought Arbitron, and I think there was one other service, AccuRatings, which Kurt Hansen runs, Rain Radio. Kurt was the founder for AccuRatings, and it was a hook. And now a lot of the songs today, they're 2 minutes longer on Spotify, because that's all they're concerned about. That's it. 2 minutes in and out. That's it. Give me the hook. Give me the verse. Done. Because most people, all they know is the hook, and they can't even get that right. Like when Morris Day put out the time, hey, you got that song that goes O-E-O-E-O. It's called Jug of Love, asshole. Oh, okay. Jug O-E-O-E-O. Nobody even knew the name of the song.
They don't know.
Nobody has a clue. But 2 minutes in and out, and that's where we're at today. And God, I don't know if it can get any shorter, because at that point you might as well just plug people into the matrix and call it a day. Call it a day.
But like we talked about a few minutes earlier, it's like, if you come up with a good song, it's amazing how it just supersedes everything, and you're bam, it just goes like when it's right.
And nothing replaces a good. I mean, nothing. No matter what happens in this music industry, a good song is always going to last.
And that's when you learn
longer than the people.
That's right. Those are the things I learned from a lot of the old timers in the music business. When you sit and you talk with them, they're the ones who are still doing very well in the business. They were flying under the radar. They were just getting little pieces of the publishing here and little piece there, but they knew how to pick good songs, and they will continue to work those songs over and over and over again. And you could see it. I mean, these songs show up on different commercials or movies. You'll hear them over and over, and at a certain point, you got to say, that's a good song, because I'm hearing it over and over again.
And it's like real estate. Real estate.
Right.
You
That's
lease
right.
land 40 years later, somebody comes along and says, "I need that. We'll give you about 10 million for it." So you may have 800 pieces in your catalog, and all of a sudden, you make a little from a lot, and then all of a sudden, one or two of them every year or two pop.
Yeah, listen, Sal, the past year, every major deal that's happened probably in the past year has been regarding copyrights.
Yes.
Every major deal. I mean, huge companies are being formed and raising millions of dollars to go out and buy copyrights.
When we were down, when I was lobbying down in D.C., I think it was 98 to about 2006, 2007. And trying to get both sides, because as a former record label guy and as a person who produced certain records here and there, I understood that side. As a guy coming from the tech side, I understood the tech side. I said, look, can we just sit down and have a decent conversation without involving these people who are going to suck us dry anyways? And exactly all the wrong people got involved in everything. The organization that was called DEMA. I swear to God, I felt like I was dealing with Mr. Haney from Green Acres. This guy was selling broken toasters to idiots. But yet everybody had, well, no, everybody says you got to deal with them. It drove me nuts. So finally, after the Small Webcasters Act of 07, which was like the last normal piece of legislation that I had been involved in, I just decided, it is what it is. Whatever's going to happen. I'm past that point of caring. And you got your piece, I got my piece, and time to move on. And I got deeper into the internet from that point on, just because it was just
get off that internet, man. Let's get back to playing music by the Delphonics and
Tom Bell. Anything Tom Bell's name was on.
Martin Circus. Remember Martin Circus and all?
Yeah, think about that. Now there was a song. A lot of people here in Chicago. It was called Disco Circus.
Right, Disco Circus.
And this thing was huge here in Chicago. Huge. And it was on Prelude again.
Right.
Anything on Prelude, anything on Emergency.
Right.
Oh, but I never understood what was behind all it. Was it a movie or was it a musical? What the hell was it?
Oh, Martin Circus?
Yes. Was it a theme for something?
No, I don't think so. I don't think. I'm trying to think. The first time I heard that would have been probably at Infinity. I'm trying to think of.
God, that thing was huge.
When
those synth drums.
They were great. Yeah, great songs. I mean, and you bring up a good thing. Like we touched on it earlier, but like when you think of like labels that you would have, Prelude was one of them. Like you knew you wanted to buy have every Prelude record. Mm-hmm. Casablanca was another one. TK Records.
Oh God, yeah, everything on Sal Soul.
Sal Soul. I mean,
West End. Yeah, West End.
West End with Mel Sharon.
Oh God.
Carey Brothers had Sal Soul.
It's just amazing when you think of the labels, and congratulations, you're part of that history. And whether you planned it or not, or whether you think you really are. I mean,
yeah, no, it wasn't. It's funny. It wasn't a plan, but but I had those guys. I mean, so as I started at Midsong Records, and I happened to be, again, I told you, I started out in the mailroom, so I was fortunate enough that being at a record company in the mailroom and being young enough that when disco finally, sort of ignited, started to make some noise here in the States, that they needed someone to take these records to the DJs, and none of the older executives at the company wanted to stay out late to go to discos. They would go right. They would go to a rock club or whatever to see a band, but nobody wanted to be seen at a disco. So
that's for the younger whippersnappers.
If the disco was even gay, that was the rub on it. So it was like, oh my God, let's send the young guy over, to do to bring the records to the DJs. Let him go to the clubs. And I was
Let
like,
them go deal with that bullshit. That was their
yeah,
let them go deal with
and that was the attitude. Is like, okay, I'll go. I'll go. But through that process, I got to meet the DJs who were who soon later to become some of the very well known, once disco exploded, and now the DJ went from being just this guy in a booth playing records to now the star of the show, basically, right? But I knew all these guys because I had been seeing them for years.
Well, yeah, great. I mean, obviously, John Luongo. John's going to be coming on in about a couple of weeks.
Great guy.
God, I love him. He's the most. I told him, I said, if I could be as diplomatic as you, I'd be a lot better off. I'm psychotic at times. I get it.
Right. He's produced and mixed some incredible records.
Yeah. I mean, 40 plus years. Yep. I mean, he basically made certain records tolerable.
There's no doubt about it. Yeah. No doubt about it.
But Jelly Bean and all these guys worked the years.
Jelly Bean and I, grew up in the Bronx together, so we've known each other for years. Ran in the same circles, and he became a DJ and ended up at the Fun House, and I was promoting records, and he was one of the DJs I would go see. It's Jim Burgess, but it was the guys like who when I learned. Guys like who's no longer with us, but Ken Friedman, who worked for Casablanca at the time. There were some great promoters that worked for these like labels. David Rodriguez, who worked for Salso. David Todd, who worked for RCA Records. And I'm talking about guys who we all looked up as a promotion person. I would look up to, because these guys, they just had these wonderful gifts of connecting with people and really being passionate about the music, being passionate about the club scene. It was a way for everybody to get together and hang out and listen to good music and just have a good, soulful, beautiful experience. And so they made it fun. They made it exciting. And that was even before, we got into the drugs and all that period. But it was really, it was about the music and stuff like that. And then it became the labels that they worked for. So Ken worked for Casablanca. I told you, David worked for Salso. So as we're looking at these labels that you're pulling up, there were some great people behind them.
The people you never hear of, right?
That people you never heard of, right? Exactly. That drove, you look at Atlantic, Joey Carvello, and the list goes on. So that's how I associate, I could tell how people associate the music, the great music that comes out of labels. But there were some great people who took those records and made them known and better, who were actually out running with me every night, who are, seeing DJs and making sure DJs played this song because they were passionate about it. They wanted people to hear the stuff. And so these little, guys at night, who, the night crawlers like myself and Joey Carvello and Izzy Sanchez, I can go on and on, and many who are no longer with us, many people who we lost, over the time, but they were true warriors of the night going out there. And I mean, we would be out all night.
Yeah. You had, and as a DJ, there was a club I worked at, I started at 3 a.m. And I had record guys come by, it was like, ready for another shot? Sure, let's do it.
I mean, absolutely. Look, if I was going to the Paradise Garage in New York, I went home first and went to sleep. I didn't get there until 4:30 in the morning, to go see Larry Levan and all these guys. And then, there were clubs and then there were some nights, I just never got any sleep because I would do all the bridge and what they call the bridge and tunnel clubs in the early evening, and then go out to see, the Xenons and the other clubs and stuff. And then you'd end up at, God knows, in the meat packing district of New York City somewhere, going to places, some basement, like at a place called the Ramrod or the Antro, and you're promoting records and you're thinking, I don't think I should be here, And I don't think I want to go behind that door over there. That's okay for me. You know.
That'll be two behind the doors and one behind the booth for that ad, sir.
But you know what? I also, it opened my eyes to, different scenes and different cultures, and expanded my mind. I was like, oh man, this is I wouldn't trade any of it for anything right now, because it was just such a great time.
Yeah, and I think we all have the same gene in this industry because it was for me it was I want to know what the hell. I don't care what they are or who's what. I just want to know what they do. I want to see. Okay, wow, they go to the bathroom. They drink pop. They
Right,
drink water.
right.
They listen to the same music I like. Okay, that I don't need to get involved in their life. I just need to know that. Oh, okay, they listen to
Right.
this. We're all good. Everybody's
And the
good. Have a nice
beauty of it
night.
is, and the beauty of it is, and most people will talk, like, for example, they use the example of the Paradise Garage, which comes up a lot. And the reason, people talk about the magic of the garage, yeah, sure, Larry Levan he was an okay DJ. I mean, he had good nights, but he also had very many bad nights. And if you happen to go to the place, but even on a bad night, the music he was playing was phenomenal. I mean, that's really what it always came down to, and that's what people responded to on the dance floor. When you get, all those folks, didn't matter, black, straight, gay, didn't matter. We were all dancing to songs that we knew, we connected with, and that was the underlying, thread that connected us all.
And if you didn't know the song, it didn't matter because it was programming. My thing was always I was always interested in programming, and just like Frankie Knuckles, there were nights where Frankie Knuckles, it was a train wreck, dude. It was an
Right,
absolute, but he was playing stuff that a lot of us were playing, but it was great because I felt comfortable in hearing that if I'm there, I'm hearing, okay, I'm cool then. I'm on the
right,
same page.
right,
And where we have a universal connection somehow in this industry, whether you're a DJ with a good ear or a music guy with a good ear, you know what's going to flow, you know what's going to work. And there were nights, like you said, we as DJs, we had bad nights. There were nights, dude, I took records, especially, at the cottage, when I was at a club called the Cottage, I couldn't throw the record because I was 30 feet in the air and I'd kill
right,
somebody.
right.
So when I was at a joint called the Safari Club, and dude, I'm telling you, we would do 3,000 people through the door on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, and I would screw up a mix, and I'd take the record and fling it across the booth, shatter it. Thank God I had friends who had a DJ store right down the block who say, "Hey, man,
Right.
can you go get me 2 more copies of this for tomorrow night?" I just lost my temper. But when you have good night, the best any DJ can have a good night or bad night, but man, that programming and what they're playing. That's what sets the mood, man. It's what
Right.
sets that mood and brings people together. Don't matter who they are, what they are. Everybody's vibing and feeling great because of what they're hearing, and nothing else matters at that point.
That's Think about it, Sal. That's the memory that lasts forever, even to this day. That you and I are sitting and we're talking about great disco records, but we can also remember the feeling that it invoked in us.
Yep.
Right? It's no different than, back in. I love the whole concept of your show and so forth, which is back in the day, because it's not just music, which we happen to be part of, but I mean, think of, you mentioned Green Acres before, and all of a sudden there was a cell memory that just popped up because I remember watching, Green Acres and shows like that, or
Mm,
even in your intro, I happened to catch an image of Barnabas from Dark Shadows,
yeah.
and I'm like, man, this stuff, it just that, and so the point is, whether it's television shows, or music, once that stuff seeps into your structure, and encases itself in your cells, that when you hear it again, that I think that's the secret of disco music, and so forth, because I'll hear a playlist by someone and a song will come on and I'll go, and it just evokes that memory for me of being on that floor of that club, who that DJ was and who my friends were, and maybe even what I did that night and stuff like that, and how much fun it was. And I just happen to love those memories. They're with me forever, and would never want to lose those.
And I get to work in so many aspects of it, whether it's TV, radio, or music, that nothing really gets old for me, Curtis. I had this discussion. I remember, because I may have done something that had to do with I Dream of Jeannie in a recolorization 3 weeks ago. So it's not old for me. I'm still dealing with it. And then there's songs, that I'll hear Rhythm of the Jungle by Zulu. And I remember myself falling asleep in the handicap stall of a bar that I was at while Rhythm of the Jungle was playing by Zulu.
Right.
There's, just certain songs immediately put you somewhere. For me, it's the handicap stall of a girl's bathroom in a bar sleeping. I just have this sick memory of that for some reason.
Right.
Everything, whether it's the music, and what we do here on the show, it's takes you back in the day. And I think it's great because we were, in 100 years, who knows if anybody can remember it. But I'm happy to know that I get to talk to you guys like you and everybody, and I've met, that we've worked with, seen each other, because we were in the beginning of it all, or the middle, because the guys before us were the guys who laid out the foundation of this industry. And they didn't know where the hell they were going either. Like when you read,
had no clue, right?
Albert Erdogan used to say, my family has no idea what I do.
And being in the music business as long as I've been, I mean, I could so relate to that story, because my family has no clue what I do. Mm-hmm. I could tell them until I'm blood, but so it becomes much easier to just tell people I'm in the record business, but that's so vague too. They just don't even know. But really, I'm in the content acquisition business. I'm looking for great content that I can get out there and create value for. Whether it's a song or, whatever. But in this case, it is music and song. And I want to get that out there to people to remember, so that, they have those same memories years from now. I get to spend time with, I happen to have a 17-year-old daughter now, and she's really into Billie Eilish. That's her thing. And I could see the way she reacts to her songs and finds songs through this new medium called the internet and so forth. But it's wonderful. And I'm looking forward to the fact that when she's, my age, that she'll have those same memories of Billie Eilish and where she was and the feeling she was, that we have, talking about, classic 70s soul, right? Or late 70s disco, because we happen to remember. I remember, 72, having to take my little brother to hang out at the fire station because he was into fire trucks and stuff like that. And I was bored out of my mind, but right next to the fire station was a record store. And so I just go into the record store and I mean, think about it. I mean, how much I miss those. And I know they're still around. They still come back, but 7 inches.
The little one-stops that carried them, all these little stores. Like you said, you walk into the store, right in front, there is
Remember the bins?
Yeah, the bin. And
remember the bins?
There was a joint called Trafficante when I was a little kid over in our old neighborhood on Taylor and Oakley. And I would go in there, and right at the front door, there were 45s, and then there were 12 inches. And I had bought Back in Love Again by LTD with We Party Hardy on the flip side, and Uptown Festival by Shalimar on 12-inch. And then on the 45s, I just looked at them and go, okay. I was sold on 12 inches all of a sudden. I couldn't care less about the 45s. And that had to be 77. It had to be the first time.
All right, so
my first 12s.
Yeah, so I'm a little older than you because I go back. Yeah. So my record store, it was, you walk in, there was a counter, and the guy was above the counter, and there were these bins, and they had numbers. It was they were labeled 1 through 30, right? And he had a sheet on the counter, right? And so you grab the sheet, and number 1 was number 1 in the bin, and it was this, Dennis Coffee Scorpio. Right, was number 1. New Birth, I Can Understand It, was number 2, and you just go down this list. And so you'd walk in and you read and you go, okay, I need a number 1, number 7, number 12. So it was so much easier. So you get a Temptations, you'd get Undisputed Truth, you'd get a Dennis Coffey, New Birth, and then for me, it was like you get it and then you take it home and you'd study it. You'd look at it and you look at the color of the label. You go Dennis Coffey, Sussex.
The time, the length.
Yeah, and you'd read everything, and you would read everything, and then you take it. And back in the day, you'd had a little 7-inch player, and you had a little spindle, and you'd stack them up, and the record would play, and then the next one would drop. And that's how probably my first DJ gig was doing house parties, and it was only because I had the 7-inch. So people would invite me to parties because they say, bring your record collection. And I'd grab my little, I had a little box, a little 7-inch box, and you throw it in, you grab your box and you go from house to house and just put them on. And people would you dance, you get a chance to dance with a girl in hopes that you can get it to the bedroom you'd grind with her a little bit and hope you can get back into the bedroom to get a couple of snuggle time and kisses.
Maybe a little time.
You finally get her to go to bed. You get her to go to the bedroom with you, and there would be and 10 of your friends would all be ready to be in there, camped on, And meanwhile, I was the DJ. It's like, where is everybody? They're all in the bedroom. They got the girls and stuff. That's it. All right, I take my records and leave. But I used to love going to the record store all the time, and from that, because I was always there, the owner would say, look, hey kid, why don't you, you like music, why don't you buy records for the store and stuff like that? So I got a chance to see all these. That's when I started getting my 7-inches for free, because I recognized that all these promo guys were coming in and trying to get the guy to buy, multiple copies of it. So they give me a promo. And that was the best part, because then you went from the actual label to a white label,
and now you were really cool and important.
Now you're really happy.
Now you really had a shot at that girl, because look,
now you were really cool.
Promo. This is
I have a promo, and I've had it before it even comes out. So,
oh God,
fun stuff. But that's what I remember. Those are things I always want to remember. To the point where, then when 12 inches came out, I mean, God, that was crazy. I mean, the first 12 inches were really just extensions of the 7-inch.
Yeah.
Right.
It was just on and on and on. 9 minutes of it,
That's it. That's it. But I remember I used to love, like, if you had a hot record, like a really hot 7-inch record, I mean, remember when it was long? It was one side was first side was part 1, and then you'd have to turn it over to continue the song, and that was part 2.
Well, that was like Alec Constantinos. Everything he did was 37 minutes long. Him and Cerrone, everything was
right.
One on forever. My first DJ, like how you said, you brought records and played them, and I used to always have records, even when I was like 5, 6 years old. I always bought records. So a friend of mine's family opens up a teen disco in my neighborhood, and a friend of ours was the DJ, but I would bring records because they had no records, and they were running 3/4-inch U-matic videos too, and the problem was the records were running out because he kept making out with his girlfriend on the stage, wasn't paying attention to the record. So finally they let me DJ, because I was bringing in records every week. I'm bringing in 50, 60, 70 records, and finally they let me take over and DJ, and
that's funny.
God, and that was it. It was off to the races. And you really, when you go to the stores and you see what people are into, it was a great time. Not only just to go shopping was fun, because you met other people who had other tastes in music, but also at the pool level, because not only did you see record label people, or they might be there, but the DJs themselves, everybody had their own little personality, man. I mean, just everybody had a personality at the record pool. And if they were a Billboard reporter, they had their extra special personality. And, that was one thing I wanted to ask you about too, because, for a while there, being a Billboard reporter kind of became diluted in value, because a lot of these guys weren't even working in clubs.
That's right.
So my logic back then, this is when Vince had Sin with Pellegrino.
Right.
I said, well, what am I going to pay for? Half these guys don't work in a club. They're not working clubs. Why? I'll service them a record. Why are they a reporter? None of them work anywhere.
Right.
Hey, so did you know? Did you have? I mean, what did you think about some of that? You had to know some of that was going on, right?
Yeah, it was one of those things. You wanted to get a record to climb the charts, of course. You wanted to have a #1 record, and the reason back in the day that was important, and you put some emphasis on it, was because back in those days, having a top 10 dance record meant you could get some licensing dollars overseas, right? Because that's what people would read. They would read the charts, Billboard charts, and they would see if you were, the top 10. Maybe they thought they were missing something, they can get something. So at least there was some way of creating value for that chart. But upon careful reflection of it, when you looked at some of the clubs that those guys were playing, and you'd go, this dude's not playing in a club that was that had any significant impact in their marketplace whatsoever. Now, so how did they become a Billboard reporter? Well, politically, they probably knew the right, promoters who submitted them, so that eventually, these promoters would manipulate them into charting the records they were working. So it was a self, perpetuating fallacy that, these records were really happening. There were many times, Sal, I looked on the top 10 of the Billboard chart. There were records in there, and I would go, who's playing this?
Right.
Nobody's playing this song.
Right.
How did this record get top 10?
And it's similar to the indie record promoters. You look at them and whatever it took to get a record at it, dude, the record sucks. Nobody's buying it, but it's top 5. Nobody knows the record exists except the 27 reporters. But what does that mean? Well, it means you're getting licensing on the record, and it's a shame because good records wound up getting pushed aside because of
and it was a shame, and it was really when you think about it, if I recall, at its height, probably the Billboard chart of top 50 or top 8, 70, whatever it was at the time, was the doings of maybe 150 DJs that were labeled Billboard reporters, but there were thousands of DJs playing in better clubs, bigger clubs, playing, who had incredible playlists that would never get the light of day.
Yeah, they were breaking. I used to have guys come to see us at Safari Club, and they would get pissed off because they couldn't believe what I was getting away with, and I said, look, I got fired a lot of times for doing that. Right. I had I'm not going to compromise what I do so I could keep a gig. I'm not going to keep kicking my own ass. I'm going to go somewhere and you like what I do and we're filling the room and you're making $60,000, $70,000 a night. Say thank you. That's all I want to hear out of you as a club owner, And you had a lot of these guys who come in, and I had, you'd have these guys like you come in. Hey, man, can you check out my record? I'm like, yeah, I'll do it right now. It's right there. Okay, if I don't like it, I'm going to mix out of it. If I'm airing out the floor, but I like it, I don't care either. If I like it, I'm going to figure out a way to make them like it.
Right.
And I don't know if you see that anymore. I think those days are gone, though.
I think they're pretty much gone. It's well, first of all, we don't have much of a club scene now these days, but I do hope that ends up coming back. But the days of being able to go visit DJs and clubs, I mean, to now you have to find out where the booth is, and you have to try and climb your way up there. It's so much work. It's probably better off to just say, look,
I'll email it to you.
I'll email you the WAV file. You figure out what to do with it. Just put it on your playlist if you can and stuff. But I do miss the contact with the DJs and the laughter and hanging out and the fact you knew who the real DJs were, when they heard it. And listen, every time, majority of times, whenever a new song comes out and you get a DJ to play it right away, more likely because the dancer or the person who's on the dance floor never heard it before, you took a huge risk by playing it because you knew they're going to walk off. They may give you, if they may love you, but they're going to go and get a drink because they just don't know the song.
Yeah, you're tripped out. Why are you playing that shit? And then
Right,
2 months later,
right?
and then 2 months later, they're telling you, dude, play that song
Dude,
again.
play that. But I used to love the DJs that would play it, clear the floor, and be comfortable in clearing the floor, and then play it again. Because they're saying to the crowd, "Oh no, this is going to be big. This is going to be big." And I've seen that happen multiple times. Where people have played, a song and then put it on again to just send a message to the dance floor. You can go have your drink, and I get that. That's cool. But trust me, in a month's time, you're going to be requesting this song. Yeah. So I want you to know now that you heard it here first. And I love those guys, whereas now it's too risky to do that. The fact that if you have a club and you clear the floor, they get it's such a personal attack on their ego that you go, dude, it's not about your ego, it's about the music. Who cares? At the end of the day, man, you're going home. Nobody cares. No one's following you home.
And like I said, in a month they're going to ask you to play that song, and then you could turn around and say, "No, you know what? I'm not playing. You know why? Because you're an asshole. Because you told me that song sucked a month ago. So you don't get to hear it."
Now it'll be more like, I'm not playing that song because I played it a month ago. It's old.
It's old. Yeah,
it's old to them.
Hey, that's old.
Right. You want to hear that song? I know it came out 3 weeks ago. You got to go to Sal's show now because that record's old school for us.
And that's another thing, the acceleration of how fast a song now becomes old. It's different in demographics, but the younger kids, everything's old to them after like 3 weeks. And then the rest of the public, and then the rest of the public might get to it 7 months later. And, I was into that last year. Last year, what? Everything is accelerated. We live in a really accelerated culture now versus years ago. We really do. So something new, it takes people so long to find out what's out there. But the kids, for some reason, in 5 seconds, it's either on TikTok, it's on Snapchat, boom, and they're in tune to it all.
They're not vested like we were back in the day. Think about it. We were vested. Like if you knew, like we had to go to the store, number one, right? We bought it. We would buy an album. We would open it up, and it was like we would like stare at it, and you'd play it, but you would read the cover. Like you knew
liner notes.
The liner notes. You knew everything on that cover, I mean, even the copyright notice, 1978 Columbia Records, but we were vested in it, because we paid for it. Today you're not vested in anything. You just go, you go right up to Spotify and you stream it and you listen and you move on.
Yeah, there's no connection. There really is no connection. Not the way there's no. It's just something you're putting on and it passes time.
Right. Do you feel that with TV shows? Right today, think about it. I mean, think about shows we used to have. We used to wait a week to go watch I Dream of Jeannie or
Chico and the Man.
Chico and the Man. You'd have to wait a whole week for the next episode. Now you binge watch it.
And for those of you just joining us, well, you missed the majority of the show. I'm sitting here with Curtis Urbina on the Back in the Day show, brought to you by DigitalSaversChicago.com. And you can catch this show and all the other shows that we've done in the past on demand anytime. They're online, no app required, because we have canceled Google and Apple. You don't need an app to come enjoy what we do. You shouldn't have to get an app. And that's another thing, Curtis. One of these days we'll talk about mobile friendly. 10 years ago, nothing was mobile friendly. Today, everything's mobile friendly. So we decided, you know what? I don't need them to go through hoops to get to us. You come to us, just go right to the domain. Just like when you go to your Chase Bank, you go right to chasebank.com on your computer. When you go to Facebook on your computer at home, even on your phone, just go to the website. You don't need to go through the app. I got so sick and tired of dealing with everything that Apple and Google, all the hoops we had to jump through. We had about 15,000 people on the app. So guess what? Go to the website. We're done. No more app. I don't want to have to go through that. So all the shows are on demand anytime. Right here, as you can see, we have all the past shows. See it on the screen there. Through the, this is the 8th week. This is our 8th episode. And Curtis Urbina, we're going to put the links to Curtis's website, to Quirk Records, and to that Mixcloud page, because I'm telling you, people, you want to listen to some fun stuff. There's some really great stuff on that Mixcloud page for Quirk Radio, and we'll get all the links once this is done. We'll put the links in by tomorrow morning, because eventually I do have to go upstairs and watch TV. I've been locked in I've been working, been running. First I'm running around all day, and then I'm down here. But Curtis, it's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure
to be able to hang out with you,
man. Thank you for doing what you're doing, man. I have a lot of mad respect for you, and we go way back. So
thank you, I appreciate it. Me too. Yeah. Right back at you, babe.
Thank you, man.
All right, you take care of yourself, and you don't forget, every Monday night, 8 p.m. Central Time. Okay, tell your friends, if you ain't got none, go rent some, bring them by. All right, Curtis, love you. You take care of yourself.
Take care,
Good night, everybody.